Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic Showcase Showdown. Um, it is Tuesday. No, wait. No, it's Wednesday. I can't believe it's Wednesday already. It is Wednesday at about 10:49. Still pretty overcast. We've had a lot of pockets of rain. Been pretty. The weather's been pretty dreary the last few days. Ever since Saturday. Friday was such an amazingly beautiful day, and Saturday was pretty nice. It started getting colder, and then ever since then, it's been pretty crappy out. And I've had been on break for school vacation. I work at the Montessori school, so we've been on school break or spring break. So I've been just taking it easy. I was going to do originally. I was going to try to do some more stuff or do some fun things during my vacation, but I got uh, I got pretty messed up during the Morbid Angel concert that I went to, which was Saturday, and yesterday was the first day. And today's Wednesday. Yesterday was the first day where I had a rehearsal, and I usually here at my place here in Northport, I have a practice studio, and I have a PA, and I usually practice here with a couple of bands, and I have a PA system, and my drums are here. I have a couple of different drum sets. I have a few drum sets that I've gotten over the years, and I have one drum set that I usually use for gigs and recording, and then I have a house kit here that I can keep set up at my practice space to use for just practicing and rehearsals. So it's pretty awesome. It's pretty convenient. It's a pretty small little space, but it's great. I keep all my equipment in there. I rehearse every week, usually in my space, and so it's for me. It's pretty convenient. But yesterday I had a rehearsal, and we it was at a different location. So we went, had rehearsal, and it was actually a good rehearsal. But it was literally the first time I'd been out of the house in a few days, and and it was the first day I've actually been feeling pretty good, mainly with my back, having ever since I got hit in the back in the insane mosh pit for the Morbid Angel show. So yeah, I didn't realize. I knew it was funny. Well, it wasn't funny, but I knew when I got hit during the concert, and the concert was amazing. Morbid Angel rules. But I knew when I got hit it was going to be bad. I was writhing in pain right away, and then it subsided quite a bit. And I ended up driving home that night, which probably wasn't the best thing. And the whole concert, the whole day was about 8 hours in the car. We split the driving. It was like 4 hours total each of us. So I drove about 4 hours. My buddy Sam drove about 4 hours. So it was about 8 hours altogether round trip. It was 4 hours down, 4 hour and then 4 hours back for me to come back to the house. And he lives in Portland, so we split the driving. And that probably didn't do my back any justice. But I knew, like, after it happened and I kind of regained consciousness at the concert, I, after an hour or two, the pain kind of subsided quite a bit. And I was surprised that it kind of went away. But and then it would come back every now and then, and it got like I'd get these like sharp pains, and then it started getting to this thing of where I was getting these like spasms in my back, and I knew it would be the next couple of days were going to be rough. So it just started to get better. So yesterday was the first day I was able to go out and be relatively comfortable. But yeah, it was quite an experience, and I been sleeping with a heating pad and this whole thing, taking ibuprofen, and today it's a lot better, but slowly getting back to kind of normal. It was, but it was dangerous. I don't know if I would do that again, but I wouldn't do it again. Probably going to another concert, but at the same time, it was they're my favorite, one of my favorite bands of all time. So the whole event was just amazing. It was better than I thought it would be. But and then today I'm going to go see tonight. I'm going to go see the new Nicolas Cage movie Renfield, which is apparently where Nicolas Cage, one of my favorite actors of all time, is playing Dracula, and I've heard it's pretty awesome. I've heard a couple of mixed things about it, but I am a huge Nicolas Cage fan. I think the last 5 years or so. I mean, and again, he's kind of he's an icon. Everybody knows who Nicolas Cage is, and he's won the Academy Award a couple times. I think once or twice at least, and he's been in real small little independent films, but then he's also in big. He's been in giant blockbuster films. He's been in all kinds of films. I mean, his career is just all over the place and just amazing. But I really think, and he's been around forever, and I really think that the last, 5 to 7 years and just what he's doing now is like the best part of his career. I think he's doing the best work he's ever done. I think I think he reached a point when he got older, and he still looks great, and I still think he's like again, I think he's doing the best work he's ever done. He's never lost that passion in the fire. But you know, I think as he's gotten older, he's like had less of a. I think he throws caution more to the wind, and he just, if he's fired up about a project that comes his way, he just does it, and he doesn't care. Not that I never really thought he was an actor that necessarily thought about commercial success or commercial viability or becoming like a rock star actor. I never really thought that, looking back at his early part of his career, he's always taken risks and he's always, done so many different things. But I think as he's gotten older, he's thrown even more caution to the wind, and he just does what he wants to do even more. And he doesn't, it doesn't matter what the budget is. And I just think because of that, he has really come into his own. I mean, some of the movies he's done have just been incredible. I mean, and again, I'm a huge Nicolas Cage fan. Wild at Heart was probably the first movie of his that I'd seen. I love that movie to death. David Lynch. I also really love Raising Arizona. I think that's just a tremendous movie. But again, so many movies he's been in, and but I think my favorite Nicolas Cage movie is Mandy. I just think that movie is just uh, a masterpiece, and that came out a few years ago. That movie is just, and I'm amazed I never hear that movie talked about. And the other movie I think that he did that is just a masterpiece is this little independent film he did called Pig. Again, a total departure, something like he's never done before. A nice quiet movie, but it's kind of a strange little movie. It's really interesting, completely original in every way. Definitely kind of messes with your expectations, but in a good way. An amazing film, an amazing film, and I think those two movies are my favorite of his entire career. But Mandy is hands down. So I'm really excited to see this new one. I've heard it's really gory, and it's like kind of a black comedy, and it's kind of a satire, and so I'm excited to see it. And again, everything he's done, even movies that I think are like say not necessarily brilliant movies, he's great. He's great in them, and it's worth watching the films because he's so good in it. I mean, The Color of Space, which was a really cool movie, super trippy. That's a really great movie. That came out fairly recently. Um, yeah, I mean, lots of great films. Ghosts of I can't remember the name of it. He did this like futuristic, apocalyptic zombie movie. Ghost. Ghosts of the Wasteland, I think it was. Super bizarre movie, but really awesome. That came out really recently. Yeah, I mean, just an amazing diversity of movies he's been doing. So, yeah, super excited. So, I'm going to do a review for Renfield tomorrow. So, stay tuned for that. I love doing the reviews for new movies. I always try to stay up on new films. I love going to the movies, and I've been trying to go more often. It's been a little bit slow as far as new releases go, but there has been some really great films. The last one I saw in the theater was John Wick Chapter 4, which I think is a masterpiece. Amazing movie. Easily the best in the franchise and one of the best action movies in recent time. And I think it could go down as one of the greatest action movies ever. I mean, it's just epic in every possible way. I saw that about maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So that was the last movie I saw in the theater. So I'm really excited to go back. So I will give a full review for that tomorrow uh, on Thursday. So stay tuned for that. So one of the things that I always talk about and that I always try to focus on, most of the time, my go-to things are films from the 70s and 80s, also 60s. I mean, I've been getting into a lot of exploitation movies that are from the 60s. A lot of movies I've been discovering that are new movies for me to experience. And I've been really falling in love with those. But for the most part, the 2 decades I always go to the 1970s and the 80s. That's my favorite. That's my favorite time period. And a lot of the times, and I think it's a generational thing, and I kind of call it the grandpa syndrome. But it happens to, I see the trend happening now where even younger people or younger folks or younger generations have they've adapted that attitude sometimes, which is a different kind of a thing than I think it was normally. And it goes back to that thing of where, well, there's nothing good coming out now. There's no new movies that come out, and people kind of crap on a lot of new movies, and that, well, they don't make them like they used to, and I see lots of people on YouTube that more or less make their careers on just taking a crap on new movies in particular. And I get that, but there's been, I think, a tremendous amount of fantastic films that have come out recently and within the last 5 to 10 years. So, and in particular, in my favorite genre, in horror, I think there's been, I almost think there's been, I almost want to use the word like a renaissance in the world of horror. I think there's been tremendous movies that have come out. There's been these new directors that have come about that are just putting out these great films. Just movies like that I can just think of, like that are new releases that I just think are tremendous. One would be the Invisible Man remake that came out about 3 years ago. Amazing movie. I did a show on that one. Another film would be, which came out last year, The Black Phone with Ethan Hawke. Tremendous movie. Going back a few more years, and one of my favorite modern horror directors, Ari Aster, Hereditary. I think that movie is just amazing. He also did Midsummer, another amazing film. He has a brand new one coming out really soon, I think either this week or next week, which I really, really want to see with Joaquin Phoenix. Super excited to see that. I'm going to try this. Fingers crossed it will be playing in the theaters here locally so I can see it in the theater. But I did get the chance. I remember seeing Midsummer in the theater, and that was awesome. I was late to the game with Hereditary. I would have loved to have seen that in the theater. I didn't get to see that on DVD or Blu-ray until like maybe a year or two after it came out. But I did see Midsummer in the theater, and that was tremendous to see in the theater. Amazing movie. And I also think Robert Eggers is one of the best directors around. The Witch, phenomenal movie, just phenomenal. That's one of those movies I think just gets better and better. The Lighthouse, incredible movie. I did get a chance to see that in the theater, and that was incredible. And also most recently, The Northman, which came out last year. I saw that in the theater also, and amazing, amazing movie. Just an incredible experience, and especially to see it in the theater. So there's been a lot of great movies, just within the horror, world alone. And I think another movie that I put up there and director who I think is a serious force is Jessica Kent. And she put herself on the map by this little movie called The BaBaDook. This movie, I think, is an example of, and again, this came out in 2014, so it's a few years old now. It's hard to believe it came out in 2014. But I remember when I first saw this, I didn't see it in the theater. I didn't even hear about this movie. I had somebody, it was a suggestion from a coworker at the time who I was friends with, and he was very much into horror films too, and he had just seen The Babadook. And it was totally under the radar for me, and I ended up renting it on DVD when it came out. It was in the theaters, and I was just totally blown away by it. And this movie really, it still has the same effect on me. But when I first saw it, it generally scared me. And I have a pretty high, as a fan of horror and as many horror films as I watch, it takes a lot for me to I guess, to get squeamish around a show, around a particular scene or a certain film. When it comes to the gore or the violence in a movie, or say a movie that might be just really disturbing. Movies where they might have, kind of like a psychosexual element. There might be scenes of rape or gratuitous violence or things of that nature. I have a pretty high tolerance for watching those kinds of things. If the movie is good and I'm digging the story, you know, I can usually get into anything, and usually, you know, those kinds of elements don't usually bother me. Sometimes I know for a lot of people, those things can really bother people significantly, so they'll have to look away, and I get that. And I'm also a fan of when a film just has a creepy atmosphere, and it could be purely a psychological thing, and that can really get under a person's skin. There was a movie that I think is a modern example of that, where it's not necessarily gory, it's not necessarily very violent. It's just the atmosphere and the psychology that is kind of brought to the screen. And that's a movie that I reviewed quite a while ago, probably like 3 or 4 months ago. And it's this German film called Hagaza, or Hoguza. And it's basically a film that's about a witch. I kind of think of it as a real general. I described that film. Yeah, it's called Haguza, and it's a movie that I had seen at Bull Moose Music, my favorite shop on planet Earth, and I'm gonna have to go there this week. Fuck it, buy some more movies. But so my favorite shop. So I remember going to Bull Moose in my travels, and over a period of time, I noticed this movie Haguza there on Blu-ray, and it looked really interesting. And it was a new movie, and I would look at it in passing, and I end up kind of skipping on it, and I wouldn't buy it, and I didn't buy it. Ended up buying other things. So, And I remember it was like the third or fourth time that I was there, and this was over a span. I go there a little bit more often now, probably a little too often just because of that money, but hey, it is what it is. And this was so I went there over a period of about 3 or 4 times over a span of a couple of months or so, and I kept noticing and seeing the movie in the aisles, the horror section where I always camp out, the Blu-ray section, and I kept seeing it. And then finally, the third time that I was, the third time I saw Huguza in the aisle, I was then I looked at it and I was like, screw it, I'm gonna buy this. So I bought it, and it was cheap. It was a pretty good price. It was a new release. It looked really wild and trippy as all hell. And I've described the film to a few people and to a couple of friends as Robert Edgar's. It's similar to Robert Edgar's The Witch, which is a like again I just said it's an incredible movie. And that movie, I've seen that movie a bunch of times, and every time I watch that movie, I enjoy it more and more, and I fall in love with it more and more just because of the atmosphere and the richness of it. So, but I've described Haguza to people as The Witch but on acid, and I've seen it a couple times, and I feel like that's kind of an accurate description, but I also feel like it might do it a little bit. Uh, it might do it injustice because that's kind of a generic thing. I think there's a little bit more to that. I think the similarities with that film is that, well, essentially, Huguza is about this woman who is a witch, and it's basically about a mother-daughter relationship, and her daughter is kind of aware that her mother is a witch, and she's a practitioner of the black arts, and she has all of this occult knowledge and has all of this power. But while she's going through this whole process, her mother is really condemned by her community, and she's basically ostracized and lives alone. And but the core of the story is really about this mother and her daughter. And her mother eventually dies without giving the story away. But her mother, who is the witch in the story, her mother eventually passes away. And the daughter basically goes through this really intense grieving process. But after she's dead, she basically haunts her. It turns into a little bit of a ghost story. And basically the mother kind of haunts and follows the daughter around. And during this whole thing, she's trying to get her bearings and come to grips with what's going on. But she also realizes she's pregnant and she's having a daughter on her own. So it's really interesting, but it's a super trippy movie. And again, it's not a movie. It's definitely a horror movie, but it's not a movie that's particularly gory. It's just the atmosphere. It's a German foreign film, and it's so beautifully shot, and it has there's certain scenes in that film that are just so utterly disturbing, and so psychologically they're just kind of brutal. And I'm a big fan of films that have that aspect of where you're not necessarily having to see lots of gore or violence. I'm a huge fan of extreme gore and violence, but I also love films of where psychologically, you're getting really moved, or you're getting your boundaries pushed. As long as the story is strong and the characters are great and you're invested in it, I just think that is really powerful. In some ways, I almost think that's more powerful. It gives the film more lasting power. You might want to see the movie even more. So, but that film was a real haunting experience. And I feel this film, The BaBaDook, which came out in 2014, is one of those films. It's basically takes place, or the concept of the film is more or less around kind of mythology and children's nightmares, and it ties in the idea, the concept of fairy tales, and it it also explores the kind of the gray area between nightmares and things that can be happening subconsciously and unconsciously, and it's also from like the child's perspective. But just a tremendous movie. When I first saw the Babadook, it really, and again, it's not a film that's particularly gory. It's not a film that's particularly violent, but psychologically, like I had mentioned, the Haguzu, psychologically, it just is kind of unrelenting. And there's certain scenes in the Babadook. It still has that impact on me when I watch it now. But there are certain scenes in it where I was generally creeped out. And again, like I said in the beginning, I have a high tolerance for those kinds of things. You know, gore, lots of extreme gore, or things that are kind of rapey, and real deep psychological things. I have a pretty high tolerance for it, and it usually takes a lot for me to be generally creeped out. But Babadook is an example of that. I was generally, there's a certain sequence in the film that involves the mother, and the movie is also, along with dealing with, the childlike perspective around fairy tales and the idea of nightmares, and it's also, I think the film is also about mental illness, because it's really centered on this mother and her son, and the father, who was part of this family, he ends up tragically dying, and it's really about the trauma around that and how that's destroying the family, but it's told through this kind of mythological narrative, in the framework of a horror film, and it's completely unsettling. And the cast for this film is just tremendous. Essie Davis plays Amelia, who is the mother, and she is a powerhouse of an actress. She's one of the greatest. I think she gives one of the best performances in a horror film in the Babadook. And again, I've seen this movie quite a few times, and it still really moves me every time, and it still like gives me a totally unsettling feeling. But the first time I saw it, it generally creeped me out. Tremendous actress, and I've seen her in a few movies since then. Noah Weissman is tremendous too. He plays Sam, who is the son, a child actor, just so great. The cast for the Babadook is just tremendous. Daniel Henschel is also in this film. Haley McCleany and Barbara West, Benjamin Risper, just a tremendous cast. The writing for this film is just incredible. And I bought this when I first saw the Babadook. I had rented it on DVD, and with the girlfriend I had at the time, we had watched it together, and she was freaked out, probably almost more than I was. And I bought this edition, this Blu-ray edition, pretty recently. I know I take that back. I bought this probably about 3 or 4 years ago. This was after I had seen it. I was like, this is a must-have, and so I went for it and I bought it, and it's just tremendous. Jennifer Kent is a powerhouse of an actress. She's a Australian director. She also did this other movie that is another movie I really, really recommend, which is an awesome movie. And it's a movie I will definitely get on Blu-ray at some point. I don't own it, but I've seen it a few times. And that's called The Nightingale, and it came out in 2018, 4 years after The Babadook. But tremendous movie, super disturbing. I almost think at times it's almost more disturbing than The Babadook in its own ways. But she's tremendous. She also did something fairly recently. There was a series that came out where it was like a collection of short horror films that Guillermo del Toro put together. and it was a Netflix show, and it was basically he kind of showcased and worked with a lot of like more modern horror directors. The director from Mandy was on it. There was a handful of different directors, and Jennifer Kent, I guess, did a movie for it also. I haven't seen it because it was a Netflix exclusive thing. It might be on DVD soon, or it might be out now. But I've heard it's really, really good, and that came out pretty recently. But it's been a few minutes since she's put out a full length feature. So I hope she does soon. I'm glad she's still working because she's a powerhouse. The other thing about Jennifer Kent is she's also a writer and director, and a lot of these things. The BaBaDook is based on I guess a short story, but I kind of consider it overall like an original work. And the Nightingale, as far as I know, is an original story. So not only is she writing and directing great films, but they're also highly original, and they really do push the envelope. One of the things that is just, I think, the strongest thing about the Nightingale, I mean, about the BaBaDook, that really got to me was the portrayal of the mother from Essie Davis. Um, and I felt like again, I felt like this movie. I feel like this movie is more of a study on trauma and the whole psychological elements. That all the psychological elements that entails. I just think that is, you know, really the main kind of focus of this film. And when I first saw this film, it really reminded me of The Shining. And I saw an interview with there's some really good special features on this disc, the BaBaDook, and the transfer of this on Blu-ray is tremendous, and it's got some great special features. And it was really interesting because when I saw there's a really great interview with Essie Davis and also Jennifer Kent. And when I first saw it, it really reminded me of Jack Nicholson in The Shining, of where you're seeing this man or this character completely lose his mind on the screen, and it's terrifying, terrifying, and he's becoming more and more unhinged. And then it does this wonderful thing of where you're not sure if this is purely psychological or these events are actually happening in reality. And I felt like Essie Davis's character as the mother in the BaBaDook really reminded me of that. Like, it went deep. And it went deep into some seriously dark territory, and it was unnerving. And it was interesting because I watched there's a really great interview with Essie Davis on here, and she talks about how The Shining and Jack Nicholson's iconic role in that film, which is my favorite Kubrick film, and I'm gonna do a show on The Shining soon, was her biggest inspiration for her role. And I was like, oh, okay, that there you go, like that makes sense. But at the same time, that was what I felt when I first saw the BaBaDook, and I still think of that, especially Essie Davis's portrayal. Tremendous, tremendous actress. If anybody deserves accolades or awards, it's her. So, but as much as I felt like, oh, okay, this does harken back to Jack Nicholson's performance in The Shining, she made it her own thing. It wasn't like some kind of, rip off, or kind of. It was definitely influenced, but it was her own thing, her own voice, which I think is really where it's at. And it's, yeah, it's So, every now and then when you hear people talk about, oh, there's no, like, they don't make them like they used to, or you have some schmuck on YouTube who kind of makes a career on just crapping on new movies. There's one guy in particular, which I can't think of his name, and probably not gonna I'm not gonna name him, but and he's very popular figure in Hollywood and on YouTube. I mean, he has like millions of people. But basically, he makes a career out of just shitting on all new directors and shitting on all new films. And there are things that he does where he gives reviews or talks about films in a positive light, but generally he waves that whole flag the whole time. And I think of that as the old man the old man syndrome or the grandpa syndrome. And and I think he's a very big figure in the world of film critics. And I think he actually has a lot of weight behind him and he actually has an influence. And I think, again, people can have their opinions, but I think kind of what he does, I look at what he does and then the negative kind of his whole negative thing has probably some degree of where it does affect the industry and films that come out, and particularly how directors say like Jessica Kent, who is an independent director, but her films also are fairly big budget. The BaBaDook is a fairly big budget, but she's still an independent actress, but she's pretty well known and very well respected now. So I think that that's a thing, and but I think, and there's a few other people I can think of that really attack newer films. But I think the Babadook is a primetime example of, even though this is 2014, it's an incredible movie. And I look at this as like a contemporary horror masterpiece. Just an amazing movie. Highly original, creepy, creepy as all hell. One of the best. I love the review on here. It's just great on the actual disc itself. And there's a really great review from William Friedkin, who the director of The Exorcist, arguably the scariest movie of all time. And his raving review just kind of sums it up. And it means a lot coming from, William Friedkin. I've never seen a more terrifying film than The Babadook. It will scare the hell out of you as it did me. So that's pretty serious when William Friedkin, director of the iconic film The Exorcist, gives you a shout out like that. And it's right on the cover, and I just think that's badass. But amazing movie. The transfer of this on Blu-ray is just tremendous. I got this really cheap. Yeah, it's such a great movie. Highly inventive, original, one of the best modern contemporary horror films ever made. And I just think, I think this film, when it came out, was successful, but I think it's kind of moved into. I think it was under the radar for the most part, and I think people over the years since it's been out for a while have come on board to this film and checking it out. And I also say, definitely check out her more recent film called The Nightingale. Tremendous movie, and highly disturbing, super dark. It's not really a horror movie per se, but it is brutal as all hell, and it's super disturbing. Yeah, but I never hear that movie ever talked about, and I just think that movie is just a tremendous movie. There's scenes in that film that are generally hard to watch. Coming from me, I guess that says a lot. But The Nightingale, okay, that came out in 2018, and that is a movie I've only seen it on DVD. I've seen it a couple of times, and I was floored. I was floored. The first time I saw it, and the second time, just floored by it, and I will eventually, get it on Blu-ray. So yeah, definitely check out The Nightingale. I'm looking forward to eventually seeing this collection that she did for Guillermo del Toro. This like horror collection of shorts. Whenever that comes out, so Yeah, check out the BaBaDook 2014. Amazing film. This is Jason Dean. I'm going to sign off for now and have a great day. And we will see you next time. Peace.